Got a great show lined up for you today. We will take a look back at last weekend of college football, and we'll preview the weekend ahead and much, much more. So stay with us inside the locker room. And we welcome you here into the locker room. Gerhard Mathagani, Chase Robinson here with you to talk a little college football, and what a wild first weekend it was.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. I mean, I know we'll get into a lot of specifics later, but wow, what an opening weekend. And I think college football has now got the ball rolling. And I've always said that I always thought it was surprising that they don't own Labor Day weekend. This year, they completely owned it.
It was supposedly the biggest opening weekend ever, and we'll talk about it now. Let's start with the Auburn Tigers losing to Clemson, though, but hung in there the whole time with the #2 team in the nation.
A lot of questions going into that game, still some questions going out, but also a lot of answers, especially with the defense. And I think what we saw at that Clemson game was the defense was a national championship worthy, and they shut down Deshaun Watson. They shut that team down to 19 points. We'll see if that happens again for the rest of the year for Clemson. And Clemson will make adjustments, and Clemson is good as well. But for Auburn, one of the biggest head scratchers was what Gus Malzahn was doing at quarterback, and rotating Sean White and Jeremy Johnson and John Franklin III in between the series. 23 overall substitutions with those three guys. I think that the offense just could not get on a rhythm and on a roll that really hurt them going into the game. And I think that even if they play okay offense, they come away with a win in that game. But they play putrid offense, and they walk away with a loss. But like I said earlier, lots of questions they did get answered Saturday night.
The Tigers take on this week
Arkansas State.
Yeah. Sean White named the starter. John Franklin III will be the second string. Will this give Auburn a chance, playing a smaller team like Arkansas State, to kind of fill out the quarterback some more?
For sure. And I think that if you wanted to do what Gus Malzahn did last week, you do it this week. You go into last week's game plan with the starter and your second string guy, and you mix in your third string guy whenever he can get a chance. But let your first two guys get the tempo going. If you're going to dabble in that three-quarterback system, don't do it on national television with everybody watching, and then you look like a fool on the backside of that. You could do it in a game like this. You can experiment. Now, that's not to poo-poo on Arkansas State, because Arkansas State's a really good football team. Won 4 out of the last 5 conference championship. That's a place that Gus Malzahn knows really well and Rhett Lashley knows really well. So that program will know what Auburn does. Now Auburn will have to have some sure footing, because they have a gauntlet in the SEC to go to, and if they want to make a push for the SEC championship, they'll have to start this week with the new game plan with Sean White and JF3.
Well, here is Coach Gus Malzahn at his weekly press conference this week on his former team, Arkansas State.
Talking about a team that has won the conference championship 4 out of the last 5 years. They've done an outstanding job recruiting. They got a very good team. Last week they got beat by a very good Toledo team, and so we know we're going to get their best. They got some very good skill guys on the offensive side of the football, and they got a very good defense, one of the best statistically defenses in the country last year, and I believe they got 7 of those guys back.
Arkansas State and Auburn will play on Saturday. Let's move to Alabama, a dominating performance from the Crimson Tide against Southern Cal.
Everybody talks about all of the upsets that happened over the weekend. One of the things that really surprised me is just how good Alabama looked. Alabama went into this game, speaking of questions with the Auburn team, they came in with a lot of questions themselves about the quarterback situation, and it was just so funny and so weird that Jalen Hurts, a true freshman, was still in the race late. And then you saw on Saturday the reasons why he was, because he was able to put together the offense, get some dynamic plays going, and because of him, Harris was able to get involved. We know what that defense was going into the game, and we just got confirmation of what that defense is in the game. I think one of the biggest things for Alabama is that they look like they found their quarterback. Now, I think that they'll still every now and again try to find out if Blake Barnett is that guy, because I think Blake Barnett showed a lot of good things, But as of right now, it looks like it's Jalen Hurts' team, and not just good. This offense can be great going into this year, and that's scary for a lot of teams that root against Alabama.
Defensively, you know, Alabama's always known for their defense. Was Southern Cal a true test to kind of see Alabama's defense?
From a talent perspective, yes, but they're not there yet. I think that under Clay Helton, they'll need a couple of years in order to get the bodies that they want to, the kind of guys that they want to. And it's just like with any change, you have to kind of slowly get the players that you want in and then get them experience. And I think that's what USC is missing right now. In a couple of years, they will be a good test, but as of right now, they have really good talent. I think we saw that, but Alabama's on a different level right now. They're playing on a completely different playing field.
The Tide take on Western Kentucky this Saturday, and here's Nick Saban on Western Kentucky.
Really good skill guys. These guys play with a lot of toughness and a lot of energy. They've got a lot of confidence. They score a lot of points on offense. They've got one of the most prolific passing attacks that we're going to see, and some very good players to implement it. And they play really tough, physical, defensive football.
And Alabama and Western Kentucky on ESPN2 on Saturday. The Jacksonville State Gamecocks, big win last week against North Alabama for the reigning runner-up in the national championship last year, JSU.
Yeah, and another interesting matchup going into this week. But really, I think what we saw last week was the start of what we think could be a special team for JSU. Obviously, we've talked about it ad nauseum just about how many players they have coming back. I think we saw a lot out of Rock Thomas. Scored 3 touchdowns in the game, had over 150 overall yards, both in the running game, but most importantly in the passing game. And I think that's what the difference is going to be with this football team. Had a lot of different transfer guys, a lot of new guys, new faces in the mix. They seem to just blend in like that just as a matter of time. So this defense and this offense look good right now. They look like the team to beat in the OVC. They have a good test coming up against LSU down in Baton Rouge. And we saw what LSU did at the Packers' home stadium over at Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. They have a lot of issues at quarterback. One of JSU's strengths is their defensive line. And everybody wants to say that, hey, this is a guaranteed game for LSU. But we saw what Auburn and JSU did last year. I think there's a chance that happens this year, not only because JSU's playing well, but because LSU has so many questions. And I think you mesh those two things together, we got to have an interesting ball game Saturday night at Tiger Stadium.
And on that, what's it going to – because JSU's played Michigan State.
Right.
They played Florida State,
right.
Auburn last year. What's it going to take for JSU to pull this one out, a night game in Baton Rouge?
Right. I think that number one thing is you can't let the moment get too big, and that's part of the reason why they have played in these games. They have played LSU or have played Florida State before. They have played, like you said, Michigan State before. And they have played against a lot of other SEC teams, and I think that being in that situation and really being in the situation last year against Auburn, I think that game really goes a lot more towards the confidence level, knowing that they can play with everybody, but then at the same time also knowing, hey, it comes down to us making plays. It's not going to be some fluke thing that happens. If we make plays, we will be okay. And I think JSU now has the confidence that they can make plays. And they got Eli Jenkins back, a guy who did it last year after their win last week. This sets up really well for them to go down there and pull off a shocker against LSU.
Well, here's Coach John Gross on playing down this week in Baton Rouge.
I think our guys have learned how to get themselves ready to play, no matter where we're playing at. No matter if you're playing at Baton Rouge in front of, all those thousands of people, or we're playing on the road, sometimes OVC, and they're playing in front of, a handful of, a couple thousand folks, So I think they're able to get themselves ready to play no matter what the environment. You don't have to say a lot this week because you go out there, you'll feel the energy before the game with that big of a crowd and that environment.
And you can catch JSU and LSU Saturday night, 6:30 on ESPNU. We're going to grab a timeout. When we come back, we'll go back to Friday night on the Pigskin Roundup and talk to an East Alabama legend, so stay with us. Back here on the Locker Room, and now we're going to take you back to this past Friday night when John Holder and Mickey Shadracks on the Pigskin Roundup got a chance to speak with our East Alabama legend from this past week, and that is from the 1989 Anniston State Championship team, Orlando Waters, and here it is now.
The Pigskin Roundup presented by Team One Automotive Group, and it is now time for our Pigskin Legend segment presented by the folks at Bill Stanford Automotive. And we've got a true legend in East Alabama football. take you back to that 1989 state championship team at Anniston High School that we had a great story about, Mickey, that you highlighted in our Pigskin Roundup magazine. And we can name household names off that team, and one of those household names, you remember Orlando Jetstream Waters. Orlando Waters joins us here on the Pigskin Roundup. Glad to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Orlando, that 89 team, as we get started talking about this, even 27 years later, and I know it seems like just yesterday to you, people still talk about that team. Mickey believes, I believe, I don't think you'll get much argument, that that was the best football team ever in East Alabama history. I'm sure you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we had everything that you would ask for on the team. I mean, we had heart. We didn't have a size, but we had heart and determination.
Absolutely.
Well, Orlando, we've got a surprise for you tonight. You've got your earpiece in. We want you to be able to hear this, but we had a very special visitor to the studio today, and we asked him about the 89 team and about you. So we want you to listen to these comments from your former defensive coordinator, Rodney Bivens.
Orlando meant everything in that team. He was that leader that you knew when he came to work that he was going to outwork everybody, and no doubt that he was the best athlete that we had on that football team, and I think he certainly is the best athlete that's probably ever come through Anniston High School. He's done some amazing things, not only on the football field, but, you know, remember when he was in the 11th grade and 12th grade, you know, he would go on the baseball diamond and pitch. He would go behind the mound and catch. He'd hit the home runs and then change uniforms and go over and triple jump and win the triple jump in track and just come back. So he was a
You know, Orlando, when I talked to Coach Bivens and we talked about the team and with preparation for the article that I wrote, we talked about all the great players that you guys had, but Coach Bivens said unequivocally, if there was an MVP of that team, it was Orlando Waters. Talk about your relationship with Coach Bivens.
I can't really explain it. I love Coach Bivens. He was the main reason why I ended up staying at Arkansas, because I went through some hard times and I wasn't going back. And he told me I was, and he packed me up, and my mom, and he drove me 10 hours to Arkansas, and the rest is history. So that's how much love I got for Coach Bivens.
Well, Orlando, I know I remember going and watching you guys play, and the PA announcer up at White Mosby Memorial Stadium saying the starting lineup, Orlando Jetstream Waters. We're seeing video here of why they call you the Jetstream. Where did that nickname come from?
I have no idea. It's just the commentator came up with it, and it just stuck all year long.
You mentioned going to Arkansas. You're wearing an Arkansas Razorback hat. Let's transition before we go back talking more about some days at Anniston, and talk about your days at Arkansas playing for the Razorbacks.
I had plenty of memories in Arkansas. I mean, that's why I grew up and became a man. But it's nothing like high school. But no, I had a lot of fun and a lot of memories in Arkansas.
Well, Orlando, we're watching these highlights here. This brings back a lot of memories because I had the opportunity to call a lot of you guys' games on local cable that year. And so I was at so many of your games in that undefeated season when you won the 6A state championship. But you talk about, you, Steve Christopher, your quarterback. You had receivers, Tracy Pilot. Ran into Billy Smith tonight at the Anniston game. He came up to me and was talking about how much he enjoyed reading the article. Callaway, and of course the defense, you had Blair, the Mixon twins. You just had so many outstanding players. Bowie was a sophomore on that team. Some of you guys went on to play in the NFL, which you, of course, did that. So talk about the talent that was on this team.
Oh, we had so much talent. The only thing we didn't have was size. We had talent at just about every position. I mean, and we had people that could have started for anybody else that couldn't start on our team.
And the scheme you guys ran. I mentioned in the article that Coach Halliday and his staff took the team speed you guys had, put it with the perfect schemes, which really at that time was not well known. I mean, there wasn't teams doing no huddle and 5 wide receivers, empty backfield sets like you guys did, but you guys just took to that system and just ran with it, didn't you? Right.
Actually, I didn't realize at the time, but Coach Halliday had us running like a college offense. Because when I got to college, it was pretty much the same stuff, and now that I realized why we had so much success, because we was ahead of our time, and Coach Halliday was too. He was an excellent coach.
Orlando, before we let you get out of here, take us back to that night, Legion Field, which was really a big deal to play at Legion Field. That's what, back in the days when only the largest classification played there. Everybody else played on campus for their state championships. Take us back to that night against Murphy of Mobile, playing at Legion Field, bringing home Anniston's first ever state championship. Take us back to that night.
Well, it kind of helped us the week before because we played Parker and in the same stadium, so we wasn't in awe when we got there. So it really is just a matter of just going and playing because we was familiar from the week before. So it really wasn't a big deal once we got there. It was our business.
Before I let you out of here, any favorite one memory of that team and that season that stands out? A lot of them, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd say it's probably the Shades Valley game because it was a game that was a really tough game, and we had to do everything we had to do to pull it out.
Orlando, thank you so much for being with us on this Football Friday night. You brought back a lot of memories for a lot of folks, me and Mickey included, here in East Alabama. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Orlando Waters, Anniston Bulldog, 1989 state championship team. All right, we're going to take a look now at our Player of the Week. This is our Foothills.
Again, the Orlando Waters there from the Pigskin Roundup this past Friday night. And Mickey, I know you got a chance to really learn a lot about that. You were announcing those games back in 1989, but to go write this article for the magazine, talk a little bit about this team and what you learned over this time.
Well, I think it's a testament to the fact that not one person has questioned my judgment that I've talked to about choosing them as the best team we've ever had in East Alabama. And I think that tells you a lot, that even fans of other schools, guys that coach now that played at other schools, they pretty much know that there's no argument with this one. You know, this 89 team was so special for so many reasons that we talked about in the article we don't have time to go into now. But needless to say, they were very unique in that they were so small, they were so fast. It was a point in time in the Anniston school system and in the city of Anniston where everybody was on the same page. Barry Halliday came in from Minor High School the year before and kind of got him on the winning track with this unique style of offense. Rodney Bivens, as good a coach as he is, he was coaching just a great staff, great group of kids, great community, great school system. Everybody was on the same page, and they made some history that year, no doubt about it.
What does it take for teams to get respect like that?
On the grand scheme, I think obviously it takes winning, but one of the things that I think Mickey alluded to, not only in the article, but you heard it from Bivens and as well as Orlando Waters, is they were almost innovators of something new. They were able to take what they had as far as in their locker room. You can't recruit in high school, technically, but you're able to take what you have in the locker room and make your whole philosophy, your whole scheme around those players and be able to accentuate their talent. That to me is a mark of great coaching. And that's also to me a mark of great coachability by those players. And I wasn't, around in this area and I was in Birmingham, but always heard about Anniston High School. And then we got here and got to know that program a lot more and this team a lot more. It's like Mickey said, I mean, it's hands down the best team to come out of this area. In order for teams these days to get that respect, I think it's the exact same thing. You got to be able to innovate some of your talent that you already have in the building and then have players that are coachable and have coaches that are adaptable.
Tell you an interesting quick story about this team. I didn't put this in the articles, and hadn't had a chance to communicate it, so I'll take this opportunity now. Barry Halliday told me a story when we were talking back during the summer about, he was using the no running backs, the 5 wide receiver, empty sets, hurry up, throwing the ball all over the place. And there wasn't a lot of that going on really at any level. Well, when Coach Halliday was coaching in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game one year, a coach was sent to Coach Halliday from Steve Spurrier and wanted to pick his brain while they were down in wherever the game was being held at that time, and picked his brain. And basically Steve Spurrier himself didn't contact Coach Halliday, but he sent someone to Coach Halliday. Thought that was very interesting, because Steve Spurrier ran the same kind of stuff. He emptied the backfield, maybe one running back, kind of like what Orlando Waters was. He was a receiver. Sometimes they'd have one back in the backfield, but all these receivers all over the place, a guy that can throw it to any spot on the field. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of fun learning about that. We're going to grab another timeout. When we come back, it'll be the Locker Room Roundtable. We'll talk some high school football as well and have our Pick 6. Stay with us here in the Locker Room. Back here in the Locker Room, and we survived week 1 of college football. I want to get you guys takeaways on the first week of college football. Mickey?
Well, where do we even start with the Auburn situation? That has gotten so much attention. I think the biggest takeaway for me, I guess, would be Auburn's defense does appear to be for real. And the other takeaway I got from the weekend was just a pure enjoyment of watching Notre Dame and Texas. And, you know, I'm no Texas fan like our Jason is, but it's kind of good to see them back and relevant. I thought that Texas-Notre Dame game was almost like being played at a different level than everybody else. I think you had 4 quarterbacks in that game that could play anywhere. Both teams have 2 good quarterbacks. And then I thought Florida State's second half against Ole Miss, and the young quarterback they've got, he's going to be tough to deal with in the next few years.
Absolutely. One of the takeaways that I got, obviously, was the Auburn defense, the Alabama offense being able to find Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. Houston, what about them? But then how good is Houston? Because we really don't know how good Oklahoma is. And so that's a lot of the takeaways from this first week is, how good are these teams? How good is Wisconsin? How bad is LSU? How bad is their quarterback situation at LSU? I'm not positive as of right now. A lot of those questions we'll get moving forward, but it was a wild and amazing few days of football. And Mickey hit on the point that the game that I got the most personal enjoyment out of was Notre Dame, Texas. That game just felt bigger. That game, and it's really 2 schools that football is better when those 2 teams are good. Football is so much better when those teams are good, and I like Ohio State and Michigan being back up there, so we'll see how the Buckeyes and the Wolverines do. Right now, it's just a good time in college football, and we'll get a lot more questions answered next week and moving forward.
Well, my biggest takeaway was from a team who I've always kept up with, and that's South Alabama and Coach Joey Jones, and they beat Mississippi State this week, and I was also really impressed with Florida State and the way they came back. Florida State's going to go far this season. Let's move to high school now. Got our game of the week, and that is Etowah and Guntersville.
We saw Guntersville at our spring challenge back in the spring. One thing that we saw out of them, had a great quarterback, had a very, very big physical offensive line, and a very good defense. They're taking on Etowah, who's right now kind of merging into that space where they're now trying to be contenders in that 5A North. This is a good matchup of 2 good teams who I think are trending in the right direction. And obviously the winner of this game has the lead in the region and probably will become the region champion. But I really, really like the way Etowah's playing right now, and they had this game at home, which I think is great for Drew Knowles and his guys.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game. I agree with Gerhard. What we saw from Guntersville back in the Gridiron Challenge during the spring, they were so impressive in the way they played against Mumford. And Etowah, this is, reminds you of the old days, the way Etowah used to be year in and year out. So I don't know. This game to me is a toss-up. I think it's just going to be a great, great high school football game.
Well, you can see that highlights from that game is our game of the week on Pigskin Roundup coming up Friday night at 10:30. We'll be all over the place covering games, and of course we'll have all the scores as well. Again, that is coming up Friday night at 10:30. It's time now for the Locker Room Roundtable, and we'll start with some more college football talk. After this past weekend, a lot of SEC teams losing. Is the SEC still the most powerful conference?
I think it's top heavy. It's got Alabama at the very top, and I think that there's a lot more parity in between. I think the SEC is kind of moving to where the Pac-12 was just a little bit ago, where teams are starting to find their way and feel their way. I do think there's a lot of – everybody keeps talking about the way SEC beats up on each other, and I agree with that to a certain extent. Because Kentucky is not as bad as Kentucky used to be. And Texas A&M is not as bad as Texas A&M used to be. Missouri, we've seen them compete for championships. So every week is a gauntlet, but I do think that teams like Tennessee, overrated. Teams like Georgia, we have no idea how they are. They've played well. I think the SEC's top heavy, established at the top, questions in the middle, not as bad as they used to be at the cellar.
I definitely think we're seeing a shift. I really do. I think things are cyclical, and sometimes you can't control some of those things. The SEC has just been so dominant for so long, and I think they're going to stay good. But I think the days of everybody else being mediocre or bad, I think we're seeing that come to an end. And again, go back to what we saw with Notre Dame and Texas.
Right.
That reminded you of, that's the way it used to be. And I agree with Gerhard. College football is better when every key game is not from the SEC. Even though I'm an SEC guy, I like seeing these other programs with all this tradition and all the winning tradition they've had be a factor. I think we need that.
We'll stay with college football. We mentioned the Florida State game. At halftime in that Florida State-Ole Miss game, Jameis Winston made his way into the locker room. I'll start with you, Mickey. For a team hearing the former Heisman Trophy winner come in, is that what got them ready for that second half?
Maybe so, because it really was a tale of two halves. I mean, Ole Miss, I thought there in the first half they were going to blow the game out.
right.
I mean, Chad Kelly was just having his way, and then it totally flip-flopped. I don't know why, but I guess Jameis Winston had something to do with it. I don't know to what degree.
Yeah, and DeAndre, their quarterback, threw a touchdown late in that first half, and I think that play was huge. That drive and the play at the end was very, very huge because he got hurt and he was able to get off the field. They scored a touchdown, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And then they caught Jameis at a good time because Jameis is a natural-born leader anyways. But I think that message falls on deafer ears if they don't score there. But they score there, they have a little bit of momentum, and then they are able to do what they did in the second half. So, yes, I do think Jameis, his speech has something to do with the motivation, but I think a lot of it had to do with what they did on the field just before they took the locker room where Jameis made that speech.
Well, let's move to the NFL now. Drew Brees signing a $44 million contract, the 37-year-old. I mean, what is this, Gerhard?
It's the NFL knowing that the quarterback is the most important position, and Drew Brees knowing his leverage, and the fact that the Saints were able to sign him to this much money. I wouldn't have signed him if I'm the GM and the brass in New Orleans. But $44 million, and you have him. It was really guaranteed 2 years. It's a 5-year deal, but really the first 2 years are guaranteed. He was asking for 4 years and $100 million. There's no way I would do that to a 37-year-old quarterback. Who knows what he'll be at 39. I think that the Saints got him maybe where they wanted him, even though it's still really expensive, but that tells you one thing. This is a quarterback league in the NFL.
It's just an astronomical amount of money to mortgage for a guy that age, no matter how good he's been. And I just, you get that age, you cannot beat Father Time, and you're up against that, and that's just a whole lot of money to gamble on right there.
All right, well, now it is time for our Pick Six, and let's take a look at last week's records for us on the Pick Six here on the Locker Room. I went 3 for 3, rough week for me. Gerhard and Mickey both 4 and 2 last week. So let's move into this week's game. First up, we have Kentucky at Florida. Mickey?
I'm going with Florida.
Yeah, the Gators haven't lost to Kentucky in 20-plus years in the Swamp. They don't win now. Florida wins big.
I'm going with the Florida Gators in this one as well. Next up is Arkansas and TCU.
I kind of struggled over this one a little bit. Part of me wants to pick Arkansas. Maybe it's the SEC bias. Maybe it's their physical style of play. But I'm going TCU strictly because they are at home.
Yes, I like TCU as well. I like them being at home. The Big 12 and the SEC have always had this rub, and I think the Big 12 gets the better of the SEC here.
I struggle with this one too. I almost went with Arkansas because Brett Bielema, you never know about him, but I'm going with TCU in this one as well. And now the Battle of Bristol, Virginia Tech and Tennessee. Mickey?
Well, I'm not really overly concerned about what happened with Tennessee last weekend. I think you see a lot of strange things in week 1, so I'm going to stick with the Vols and pick them here.
Yeah, I think that part of what they were doing last week might have been a little bit looking ahead to this game right here. That's the reason why I think that Butch Jones and his guys, they refocus, they get settled, they win in Bristol. I'm
going with the upset. I've got Virginia Tech in this one. Next up, South Carolina and Mississippi State.
Gosh, I struggled with this one too. Neither one of these teams were very impressive the first week, even though Carolina won. I'm going Mississippi State at home in this one.
I think a lot of what we're talking about with the Tennessee game happened with Mississippi State. And I know you gave credit to South Alabama, but I think a little bit of this was Mississippi State. Looking ahead, I like the Bulldogs at home, even though South Carolina got a narrow win over Vandy last week. I'm going with South Carolina Gamecocks in this one. And next up, we got Wake Forest and Duke.
I'm going with Duke in this one.
Battle of basketball schools, and I'm going with Duke as well.
I've got Duke in this one also. Next, Louisville and Syracuse.
I'm going to go with the road team here, Lamar Jackson, Bobby Petrino. I think they'll be able to get it done in a tough environment at Syracuse.
One of my takeaways was just how good that guy is. Lamar Jackson is going to be a stud this year. I think Louisville wins going away.
I've got Louisville in this one as well, and we'll see how we do coming up next week here on the show. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Locker Room. We'll see you next week.